Reload Director of the U.S. Embassy Jakarta, Dr. Bradley Horn. Brad, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Mariska. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So I would like to begin, of course, by thanking Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta for hosting yet again another virtual talk for us, specifically for Professor Dr. Sukamta, the Vice Rector. Thank you. It's wonderful to see you again. It's always so important to have the support of our partner universities on these programs. So I'm grateful for Dr. Sukamta's presence today. I will, ladies and gentlemen, I apologize if you've been on these calls before, because I may repeat myself, but I want to tell you a little bit about why I am so excited to be here this morning and collaborating with the Extensive Reading Foundation and with IERA, the Indonesian Extensive Reading Association, and also with Bahasa Bali. I'm so pleased to see these three partners together today. I've been a regional English language officer with the U.S. Department of State for over a decade, let's say, and I've served in many different countries. But I was especially excited 2.5 years ago when I arrived here to find that IERA existed, the Indonesian Extensive Reading Association, because in all of my previous assignments, I had never worked in a country where there was an affiliate of the Extensive Reading Foundation. And in my own doctoral studies, I had learned about ERF. I had also, of course, learned about the theories underpinning the use of extensive reading as an approach to promoting English and second language learning. I'd read Dr. Waring's name many times, although this is, I think, Rob, the first time we've actually been on a program together. But I was well aware of Rob many years before coming here. So it was particularly exciting for me to finally be in a country where I could collaborate with people I'd been reading about for 2 decades or more. Sorry, not to give away our ages. But then I was also extremely excited after getting here and learning about the existence of Bahasa Bali, because I am also passionate about the idea of promoting and preserving heritage languages. And so to me, it seemed like a very match made in heaven, if you will. And when our friends at Bahasa Bali, when I learned about the materials that they created, and these are some of the new books that Clara has sent us. So Matar Suksma, Clara, for sending these things to us. They're wonderful. But I was so excited to find out about the engaging content that our friends at Bahasa Bali were creating to preserve and promote their language, Balinese. And this is important, as we all know, in the context of literacy instruction in Indonesia, which has been the focus of previous virtual talks. We know that there is content for young readers in Bahasa Indonesia and in English that is available here, but we also recognize that it may be too expensive and not widely accessed by non-elite students. I love browsing through paperclip and books in bites or books in bits and the stores in the mall, but then I recognize that those stores often aren't very crowded, if you will. And I think we see that we don't see kids reading as widely as we would like in either Bahasa Indonesia or in English. But then that issue is compounded even further when we're talking about local or regional languages like Balinese or Sundanese or any of the hundreds and thousands of languages that are spoken in the archipelago that may not have the same, that may have a literary tradition or may not have a literary tradition, but their the availability of materials and literary content that is specific for young readers and developing readers may be far less. And of course, as literacy instructors, we also recognize that in today's age, there's a tension. And there's a tension between reading for pleasure and these dreaded things, devices, right? And I see that in digital media, digital content. And I see this in my own home. I'm the parent of 2 daughters, and my daughters are perfect examples of the extreme opposite, if you will. My middle school daughter, yesterday evening, happily told me and her mother about the fact that she had just finished her 63rd book for this school year. This is a way she's responding to ASBB, to the social distancing restrictions and being in quarantine. She's been reading like a mad woman, if you will, and it's making us quite proud. Although she's been a little bit mean about it because Dad and Mom are too busy to read as much as we would like to, and she's making fun of the fact that she's reading a lot more than us. But you know what? As a parent, that's okay. I'll allow that. She's read 63 books in the course of one half of a school year. But I contrast that with her sister, who's a high schooler, who is on the device and consuming TikTok, YouTube, the things that we realize that kids are the things that are attractive to youth. And when we ask her why she's not reading as much, she says, look, I've got to read for my classes, and why would I want to read anything more? Reading for pleasure is a struggle with one kid, but not for the other. The other one's hooked. Of course, we know that digital devices need not be the end of books or reading. And of course, the idea early on was that the promise of ebooks could overcome the cost of printing and delivering hard copy books. And while that might seem to older readers like myself and some others who are probably watching this, you know, we love the feel of a book in the hand. You know, younger readers are comfortable reading on screen. There is, in fact, a lot of hope for ebooks still they would maintain. And the Asia Foundation's Let's Read Asia site is a great example how digital content can be used, you know, can be shared through digital platforms for both learning a foreign language, but also for heritage language maintenance. And if you are not familiar with the Let's Read Asia site, I'm sure some of our panelists will probably bring it. I have a sense especially Bali is familiar with the Let's Read Asia site. But nevertheless, any effort like this, the Let's Read Asia site or any other effort to preserve languages, to promote languages, and to share, to promote literacy, are dependent on having materials, content that is engaging to young readers. And especially in less commonly taught languages, or languages that do not have youth content available. That's where you come in. That's where literacy educators have to play a role in creating content. So I'm hopeful today that our panelists, our speakers, can give you some really good pointers or food for thought on things you can consider as you seek to create materials and content that young Indonesian students can use not only for learning English, that's an important part, and as the regional English language officer, we certainly want them to learn English, but also for learning Bahasa Indonesia and for learning their mother tongues or the regional languages of your very rich culture and country. So that's it for me today. thank you again, Ibu Mariska, Bapak Sukamta, all of our friends at IERA, Dr. Rob, Clara, thank you all so much for coming together this morning for this excellent virtual talk. Ibu Mariska, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Brett. Now we have come to the main session of our program today, which is the presentation and also the discussion session. I would like to invite, hand it over to Ani, PhD, to lead the presentation and discussion session. The screen is yours, Ibu Ani.
Thank you, Ibu Mariska. Good morning, Ibu Bapak. Can you hear me well? Okay, right. Yeah. Thank you, Ibu Mariska. Pak Sukamta, if you are still here, thank you for opening the our webinar today. And then thank you, Pak Brett, for the opening speech also. Bu Fenty, hope you are well. And yeah, today we are going to have our writing and publishing, road to extensive reading around the world. And today's talk would be about writing and publishing your graded readers. And we already have Ninyoman Clara Listia Dewi from Bahasa Bali, and we also have Dr. Rob Waring from the Department of English Language and Literature from Notre Dame Seishin University in Okayama City, Japan. And well, good morning also for the panelists and also the participants. I would like to say thank you to Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta, American Corner, for helping us to have the event. And for our first, if we can see the rundown of the webinar today, we are going to have Ibu Ninyoman Clara Listia Dewi first, right? Okay, I would like to read a very short curriculum vitae of Clara. Can I call you Clara?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, Clara. Clara is a master's student of international relations programs at Universitas Gadjah Mada Yogyakarta. And you just started last year, Bu Clara?
Clara, can I call you Clara? Yes.
Right, but you were also an academic fellowship at Young Southeast Asia Leaders Initiative, fall 2019 at University of Montana, USA. And you are, what is it? You are a graduate of Udayana University from International Relations. And you have been working and volunteered quite in a few parts of the world, and including like you are the director of communication of Bahasa Bali, and then you used to be an elementary school teacher too. Oh wow, okay. And then you were co-founder of Bengal Energy Community, and then you are also the founder of Gerakan Udayana Mengajar, and then also used to be the president of Students' Council at the university. Okay, good. And you actually received quite a few awards from National Geographic Explorer 2019. And then you are an alumni of YSEALI for Fall Academic Fellowships. And then Young Leaders for Social Development in 2019. And then also becoming the Duta Baca Bali Province 2019. That's a great credentials, Bu Clara. And I would directly also read Pak Rob Waring's CV, a short CV actually. Yeah, Pak Rob Waring is working at Department of English Language and Literature, and he is busy at the moment. His big project at the moment is finishing the graded readers for children's, and he is going to be quite busy for the next 3 months, okay, working on the project. Okay, well, let's now start with Ibu Clara. Ibu Clara, the time is yours.
Thank you, Ibu Ani, for the time. Can I share the screen directly? Yes. Hi everyone. Hi, Pak Brad. Nice to meet you again in this very special occasion. Thanks to Ibu Ani. Hi, Pak Brad. Thanks to Ibu Fanti and Pak Sukamta from UMY, and Yera and Pak Dr. Rob. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for the time and occasion that given to me in this very beautiful morning, because this is time that I can introduce you to what Bahasa Bali Wiki have done so far about the reading and writing and how to engage student and community to engage more in reading activity, especially in Bali and not outside Bali as well, around Indonesia. And I'm so happy because it is a good time for us to share and discuss what we have done to developing the skill reading for students and also the writing skills that very helpful for developing skill for young people especially. And I will share my screen. I would like to introduce you or some what we have done so far. Okay. And I will share my screen. I would like to introduce you or some what we have done. Yeah. Do you see my screen? Yeah. Okay, great.
It's very clear, thank you.
Yeah. So I would like to introduce you of superhero Lohayu Manikmas is a woman superhero virtually that we created in Bahasa Bali Wiki. And the books like Pak Brad already shown to you, that's the books that we already created along to 2020 until this early 2021. And I would love to share to you what actually the goals that we really want to show it to you about these books, about the superhero, and what is the value that we really want to put in our children and students in Bali and around the Indonesia. So welcome to Superhero class. And I will next my screen. So who are we? We are the collaboration of artists, anthropologists, people from within outside Bali who are collaborate each other to strengthen the Balinese language and as well as the culture. And we really want to emphasize that the Balinese culture, especially as well as the language, we can preserve in a digital platform. So we created online dictionary in 3 languages: Indonesian, English, and also Balinese. So we really want to make sure that everyone who to preserve their local language can access easily. So we really want to keep the Balinese socially strong and sustainable. And nice. Sorry. Okay. So we strive to encourage people to view Balinese by making many platform in our online dictionary, such as Wiki Dictionary is an involving multimedia living Balinese English Indonesian reference Wiki Dictionary, and then we have a competition called Wiki Marathon, or we call it as Wikiton. It's a competition that provides an opportunity for community to express their idea creatively and to make them feel that this is the safe place for to express their idea, especially for the young people. And also collaborate with Google. So when you search Google now, there are Balinese homepage, That is what we have done with Google since 2011. And then we also provide some educational materials for Balinese teachers here in Bali who want to teach their student about the language, about the Balinese culture, and we provide all of the educational material for teacher outside Bali who want to learn more about the Balinese culture as well as the language. And the last one that I would like to share to you is about the superhero project Lohayu Manikmas and how we can collaborate together in the near future with this kind of project Lohayu Manikmas. And this is it. Women Superhero Project Lohayu Manikmas is the project that we really want to match with one of the SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals in number 5, that is achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls. So that's why we choose a woman as a superhero. So we call it her as a Lohayu Manikmas. She is 8 students and she is a woman superhero, and we really want to make all the people or the young people especially inspired by the Lohayu Manikmas as a woman superhero, and this is really matched with one of the sustainable development goals. And then actually this kind of story this is not the book from Bahasa Bali Wiki only, but it is called co-develop with the community. We are collaborate with many organizations such as a community or foundation, or we are collaborate with teachers in Bali. We are collaborating with the students. We also collaborate with Twitter and the Pacific to make such a campaign for the public, so the public can, contribute their ideas in making this story. This is very cool, and I think this is it was so fun because the public, the netizen in around the social media can express their idea what they want to put in the story of Lohayu Manikmas books. I think this is very good engagement with Bahasa Bali and people around the world because they really put the intention on it and they really want to put their idea on the story that we are making. And then we also involve local Balinese artists. As you can see on the slide, that is one of the famous singer in Bali. If you know Nafikula Band, one of the singer want to collaborate with us because by making such a beautiful song of Loh Ayu Manikmas animation. And we really want to gather all the Balinese artists as from the writers, illustrator, animator, and also songwriter. And then we also got a lot of public support from Udayana University in Bali, Balai Bahasa in Bali, and other communities really put their focus and attention on literacy and reading, especially. So that is such a good collaboration. So that's why we call this project as the co-developed community project, because this is the project that created by all the people, not only Bahasa Bali. And next, and what is our goals, especially like what I have explained to you before. We really want to achieve one of the SDGs in achieving gender equality and empower all women and girls, because we really want to empower more women, more girls to take their role in public, to take their role in developing literacy skills and also developing their self. So we really want to Loh Ayu Manikmas as a girl and inspire all other girls in the world. And the second one is this project hopefully can be a way to develop of arts and creative industry not only in Bali but also all around Indonesia. So basically, young people to be ready to become young professionals, developing the passion of reading, and also cultivating their interest in sustainable impact. Because we really believe that by making a good development in literacy, it is also a good way to fixing what the condition of the literacy and education in Indonesia, especially. because that is the very important things to make young students, young people to put more attention on reading and writing. And also the last one, we really want to make a sustainable creative arts industry. So that's why we involve all the local artists. And in every books that we created, involve different writers, different illustrator, and different animators. So we can give an opportunity for many local artists in Bali and around Indonesia. And then what is actually impact and long-term benefit that we by this kind of projects? The first one is by creating an creative industry in Indonesia that focus on children books with focus on Bali as a model and promotes passion of reading and improve reading comprehension, analytical thinking, and writing book reviews. And we also want to develop a creative industry that supports professional writers, illustrator, and others. That is the impact and long-term benefit that we are seeing so far. And the important things that we really want to emphasize is the collaboration. And I really hope that this kind of conversation, this kind of webinar, we will have a good collaboration in the futures together, writing the same book together. And so far, we and did the Kafan books in early 2021 this year. This is the cover of book one, book two, and book three. And those kind of books are written by a different writers. The first one is about Tresnering Alas. Is actually the Balinese language that is the translate into love with the forest. So in this, the books could be very. The first one is about environment. The second one also about environment, and the second one about the literacy. And this book is based on the two languages, and English. So if the student want to learn Balinese, they can read in this book, as well as if they want to learn English or Indonesian as well. And in the book also, we put some of the great pictures, great illustrator that made by a local illustrator. So those kind of free books you can read freely in our website. I will type our website later in the chat box, or you can just go to Let's Read Asia, because we already put these books in Let's Read Asia. And so far, this kind of free books is already used by many teachers in Bali as an educational tools by them to teach Balinese, either English and also Indonesian. And this is the newest books that we created, the book 4, 5, and 6. We got a new illustrator. So if you can see the difference, it's a different illustrator in the different book. So the 4th, it's about the ocean plastic waste. We are collaborate with the Copernic Foundation and also Sustainable Sushi from the Body Shop. We really want to emphasize how actually the dangers of the plastic in the ocean, and we really want to ask young people to take care of their ocean. And the book number 5 is about the local fruits. We write something that's really interesting. It's about the local fruits, and that is already substituted with the import fruits. And this book we are collaborate with United in Diversity. And the last one, the 6th book, is about dengue fever. It's about the health as well as the environment. So this is very special book in book number 6, because the writers are the students from Washington D.C. and also students in Bali. They are collaborate each other to make the book 6. And if you want to read this kind of books, you can access easily in Amazon, also in Kinokuniya bookstore, or you can also buy it online. And with the project that we already bring to you, that we already make, and we already collaborate with other people. We also collaborate not only with the Balinese teacher in Bali, but also some of the organization in outside Bali. This kind of project, we got the grant from the national have an occasion or opportunity to introduce this project, the book, the children books of Lohayu Manikmas in National Geographic Scholar Festival in Singapore in 2019. And because this project are granted by National Geographic Society, we also have got the opportunity to work together with Twitter Asia Pacific in Singapore. They supporting us in making a campaign for change. So we can use the Twitter of Lohayu Manikmas to make a campaign about loving the ocean and gain an awareness of the people about the dangers of the ocean plastic waste.
Bu Clara, I'm sorry, you still have about 5 more minutes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And this is a very good collaboration with Relo in the early 2020. We have extensive reading and creative writing with Relo at the US Embassy in Jakarta. That is an event that's very, very good because both Human books are used by the teacher to make a session material in teaching English. And this is such a good collaboration with the rail, and we really want to make that happen another in the future because the teacher is very, very impressive with those kind of event. And we are so happy because Lohayu Manikmas books are used in that event. It's very good. And the last one is Indonesian Superhero Reads on program with Indonesian Embassy in Indonesian Embassy in Washington D.C. So we have more than 2 weeks workshop or webinar with the students in Washington D.C. and they were so excited with this book. Yeah, and then what can we collaborate with? The first one is Loh Ayu Anikmas book can use as a educational material. That really contact me if you want to use it. And we also can do a collaboration in writing the story in the next books. So it's many possibilities that we can do. So that is the introduction from me. Thank you very much. If you want to ask a question or maybe make a collaboration in the future, don't hesitate to contact me via email or WhatsApp. And thank you very much. Hope this kind of event can give us many opportunity to collaborate each other in the future. Thank you, Bu Ani.
Thank you, Ibu Clara. Wow, I really love the character of the superhero, a very powerful girl. High school students? Is that right, Bu Clara?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Loh Ayu Manikmas. That's a very pretty names with a strong characters. Okay, very good. Thank you. And we are going to continue to the next presenter. Ibu Bapak, please drop in your questions. And Bu Clara, you can also see one question is directed to you. You can think about it while waiting for our next presenter. Pak Rob Waring, the time is yours. Please drop in your questions. And Bu Clara, you can also see.
Hello, everybody. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're well.
Good morning.
I hope you can see my screen. Is that correct? Okay,
very
good.
clear.
Right. Okay, so I have many different things that I could talk about regarding this this particular topic. I think what I'll do today is I'll just talk a little bit about how we make stories and how we come up with a series of material for the students. I can talk a little bit later or maybe at some other time about the exact process of getting published, but there's no point in telling you that until you have a story to be published. So we'll start off with looking at story and story construction. And you can see the title here is called The Ins and Outs of Writing Graded Readers. So I should start off by, first of all, explaining my background. My background is I have already written or edited 6 different series of graded readers. This was written about 10, 12 years ago, and it's a very low-level series called Foundation Reading Library. This is a series of non-fiction material published by National Geographic. There was 100 books in this series. This was a series of 50 books that I was the editor for again, National Geographic. This is a series of children's books that I was involved in. The 60 books, I wrote 30 of them for a company called eFuture in Korea. And I also have another series called the World History series, which is the series here. So I have quite a lot of choice. Now, when you as a teacher or as a parent, when you go to the bookstore, typically when you go there to buy books for your students, this is what you see. Most of the time, you will see books like this. You can see there's a whole range of different titles, and you will see that there are books which are written as standalone books. These are books written by the author for children. Sometimes they're written in a series, but most of them are not in a series. These books here are written in a different way from graded readers, which is the topic of the talk. So you can see here they all have their own individual cover, their own individual title, and so on. So these are some examples of very popular books which you may want to get, and these books are fantastic. These are really, really good books, and you should consider getting them. However, are books for native-speaking children good for EFL learners? Well, this is a question. So we have to make sure as teachers that the students are reading at the right level. If they're reading something that's too difficult with many words and things they don't know, then clearly not a lot of learning is going to happen. And for extensive reading, as you know, this should involve fluency. One of the major goals of extensive reading is to build fluency, to build reading speed so that students can read naturally at their level. However, when we look at books for native-speaking children, we see material like this. We're almost home, said Arthur. Too bad. You only read 8 words. No ice cream today for you. Hold your horses, said DW. I spy ice cream. Hot dog. I read 10 words. Let's eat. Now, when you look at this, you think, well, they're all quite simple words, but there's some really difficult expressions here, like hold your horses. I spy ice cream. I mean, only a native child would really understand what that means. It's a play on words. It's a game that children play when they are young. And if you don't have that cultural background, you're not going to understand. And here another one, hot dog. Now, this is clearly not something you eat. This is an expression that you use, which means surprise or something like that. So we have to be very careful when choosing material for students that they can actually understand it. And there's enough background knowledge that they have that they don't need teacher support. So the question is text written for children suitable for L2 extensive reading? That is text written for native children. Materials written for native children are largely inaccessible to non-natives as fluency materials for most EFL learners. And this is research by Webb and McAllister, and there's a lot of other research that suggests this as well. We have to be very careful about choosing, say, American books, English books, Australian books for our children. If their English is high and they're in an English medium instruction, for example, in an international school, books for native English speakers generally will be fine. But for most EFL students, graded readers are significantly more accessible. So what are graded readers, just to be clear? Many people in Indonesia are not familiar with graded readers. This is a type of material which is written specifically for second language and foreign language learners. And there's many, many different types. There's stories, they're little short storybooks. There's about 5,000 different ones. Some of them are non-fiction. We have lots of different stories. We have children's stories, as I showed you before. Very, very low-level material, all written understanding that the students have very, very little English. Some of these stories are like cartoons. Some of them are classic stories like Sherlock Holmes, Elephant Man, Adventures of Tom Sawyer. So reworks of classic stories also, but written in simple and easy English. These are not the originals. These are written in easy English to make them accessible to students. And here are some more. And there's lots and lots and lots of these books. So what are graded readers? And we call them graded readers because they are graded. Now, this does not mean school grade, like first grade school, second grade school, third grade school. No. What it means is they go from easy to difficult. So they start off with maybe phonics at the beginning, and then they go stepped up through the difficulty with easy vocabulary at first and easy grammar to more difficult vocab and more difficult grammar later. So the idea is that students become comfortable with phonics, then they start to read books which are very, very easy, and then the books get a little bit more difficult, more difficult, more difficult, and so on. In the end, we end up with native materials. And graded readers are graded because they are stepped up in different levels. So graded readers typically have different levels, like level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, and so on. And they're written in a very different way from the way we write normal materials for children. So the easiest level, there's very few words. So this is a picture from a story. The children play by the water. Just one sentence. At the next level, beginner level, it's a little bit more difficult vocabulary. The grammar's still quite easy. But now we have a little bit of dialogue. Good morning, class, he says. Your new teacher's coming today. So again, we still have a lot of picture support. At the elementary level, we start to get paragraphs. The pictures get smaller. The text gets smaller. The sentences are longer, a little bit more difficult grammar, a little bit more difficult vocabulary, and so on. At the intermediate level, the text gets smaller, much less for pictures. The books are longer, 3,000 or 4,000 words. The topics may be a little bit more difficult, and so on. And we go up through this type of material, and eventually at the advanced level, no picture support, we just have the text, and sometimes the book is 8,000 or 15,000 words. The plot may be complex, 2 or 3 part sentences more difficult, grammar, and you can see that the level is being raised. So let's just read a typical material that would be written for very young learners. So here we have a story, very, very simply. It's in very simple language. The children were outside, they were playing football. Wilf kicked the ball, it landed in a bush. Sorry, said Wilf. Wilf couldn't get the ball. I can get it, said Kipper. Kipper found a case. Look at this, he said. I found it in the bush. Now you can see with this story, it's very simple language. The objects are being shown, they're being demonstrated to the reader. Look at the case, he couldn't open it. Wilf looked at the case. What can be inside? He asked. It looks important. So of course they're thinking maybe money is inside this case. What's in it? Asked Wilma. I don't know, said Chip, but it looks very important. She's thinking gold. What's in the case? Asked Kipper. I don't know, said Biff, but it looks very, very important. And you can see a pattern here of repeating the language. Very important, very, very important, and so on. What's in the case? Asked Dad. We don't know, said the police officer, but it's very, very important. And you can see the story building in terms of structure. We're building up suspense about what's in the book, in the case. And here, the policeman, maybe he thinks it's top secret. A man came in a big car. Who is he? Asked Kipper. I don't know, said Dad, but he looks important. The man took the case. It's my case, thank you very much. It was stolen. It's very important. The man got in the car. Excuse me, said Wilma, what's in the case? Now, here we have the critical moment in the story. We're going to find out what's in the story, and every story needs to have this, what we call obligatory scene. And what's in this case? His lunch, right? So this is a story that children will enjoy because it's a little bit of a surprise at the end. Now, this book is actually written for native children. It's by Oxford University Press. However, graded readers are written in a slightly different way. And here you can see a story by Jojo. And I'm going to read you just a little bit of Jojo's story so that you can get an idea of what a graded reader would look like. This story is a very, very powerful story. This is not for very young children. This is a story that can be read by adults as well. It's a very powerful story. This one is actually quite a dark story. So let's just read a little bit of the story. Chapter 1, Only Me, Jojo. It's dark again, so it's evening. It's the third evening. No, I'm wrong. It's the fourth evening. It's Tuesday? Wednesday? Thursday. Yes, it's Thursday. Why do I count the days? Why do I say it's Thursday? There aren't any more days. There's just time. Time when it's dark and time when it's light. Everything is dead. So why not days too? Yes. No more days, no more Thursdays. There's only now. And there's only me. Why? Why aren't I dead too? That's a stupid question, Jojo, I say to myself. You know why you aren't dead. You aren't dead because you weren't in the house. You were in the fields when the men came. But that's not my question. I want to know why I was in the fields. Why wasn't I in the house with my family? There are no answers to questions like that, Jojo, I tell myself. So we're now here. Because there isn't anyone else. I think there are mice here. I can hear them at night. You can't talk to mice. But there aren't any other people. There's only me, Jojo. I know this because I listen. I listen all day and all night. I hide in our stable where the horse lived. And I hear nothing, just mice. The village is quiet. There's smoke now, but the smoke is quiet. The fires were noisy, but the fires have stopped. It rained yesterday, and after the rain, there were no more fires, just smoke. Of course, I'm not the only thing living here. As well as the mice, there's a dog somewhere in the village. I can hear it. There are rats and flies, but I think I'm the only person here. All the others are dead. Everyone is in the village is dead. There's only me now, and I don't know what to do. So this is an example of a very, very powerful story. As you were listening to the story, images came up in your head. You have questions. It's dramatic. What happened? What happened to Jojo? What's going to happen next? Who are these men who came to the village? Why are they here? What's the setting? What's going on? So you have lots and lots of questions that you feel you need an answer to. And this is an example of very, very good graded reader writing. So when you're writing a story, there's three important things that you need to think about when you're writing a story. A short story or a long story, doesn't matter. The most important thing you need to think about is the story. What kind of story are you writing? Is it powerful? Is it engaging? Because if it's not engaging, the students will put it down. The second most important thing is story. The third most important thing is story. Without a good story, nobody's going to read it. And all the time and effort you've made into writing good English, making English beautiful, is not going to make any difference. It's not a good story, they're not going to read it. So I'm going to talk now a little bit about how we write the stories. So what makes a great graded reader? Well, the first thing we need to think about is a strong concept. So, for example, this is a concept. A man comes home for his father's funeral only to hear he was murdered. He has to discover the truth and ensure justice is done. Now, this is a dramatic concept. It sets up the story. It raises questions and is dramatic. We want to know who the murderer is, what will our hero do about it? Sorry, that should be what will our hero do about it, and how will he get the justice he wants? So there's a movement here. We need to find a background. We need to know what's going to happen and how is he going to get justice? How will justice be found at the end of the story? So in this way, every story should have some kind of message or meaning to it. There has to be a reason for writing it. And the question that we ask, these questions we ask here, have to be answered by the end of the story. So when you're thinking about a story to write, you have to have a vision of what you're going to be talking about. It could be a story about justice. It could be a story about loneliness. It could be a story about a comeuppance. It could be a story about jealousy, and so on and so on. So what's the story about? The second thing is there has to be high stakes. It has to be important. So a story of a family fleeing from a dictator has a strong dramatic potential because the stakes are high. They are literally life and death. So for this story, the setting is really important. How are these people going to stay alive? Notice, we're not particularly interested in the setting. What we're interested in is how are these people going to deal with their situation? And we learn about people through the story. The events are not really important, and we'll come to talk about that later. However, a story about a girl who lost a teddy bear isn't going to hold interest long for adults. For children, yes. High-stakes stories make a reader sympathize with the characters, and you have to sympathize with them. You have to feel their pain. And the stakes should be very important, vital importance to the character. They may not be important to you, but they have to be important to the character. Why? Because we can feel their pain and feel their situation. We can engage with them. There should be a good balance between the archetypal character, the kind of stereotyped character, and the ones you create. So we have to have a character that is identifiable, but at the same time has to be original. The characters that you create should be believable, they should be alive and interesting, and have depth and not just be wooden or stiff. So in good graded reader writing, like we saw with Jojo's story, we were not told about the men came to the village and killed everyone. We find out through the dialogue. And we can feel Jojo's pain. We can empathize. We can sympathize with Jojo. We can feel how Jojo would feel. So the characters should be faithful to their characteristics and personality. By this I mean, if you're going to say at the beginning of the story that someone's a kind person, then they should continue to be kind throughout the story. We can't have them being unkind throughout for the rest of the story, unless that's part of your storyline. A very, very important point to notice here is that characters emerge from their choices. So we have to put them in a situation where they must choose, and we have to show them, we have to show this. So for example, imagine there's a story about a house that's on fire, and the man has a choice. He hears inside the house there is someone screaming or a cat is screaming. Now, if as a writer you say the character goes into the house and saves the animal and saves the child, that's one way, and that will tell us about the character. You don't need to say he was brave. However, if you write the story in a different way, that the man saw the house was on fire and the cats inside were dying, and then you write, he smiled, that's going to tell you a lot more about the man's character, about the evil side to his character, than it would be by just saying, you know, he is an evil man. So we can tell from the choices, whether you go into the house or not, about the character's person. And all good stories are set around characters and their choices. So you shouldn't tell us they are courageous, show us by their actions. If they're going to save the cats and the children in the house, show us. Don't say, he was brave, he went into the house. Just show us. Another thing should happen is the character should grow or learn over the course of the story. So if at the beginning of the story, maybe they are unkind, at the end they have to be kind. Or if they start off being evil, then they have to be maybe not so evil, and so on and so on. So they should learn or grow over the story. Don't just create a character to create balance. So if your story is mostly about boys, for example, don't just put a girl in the story to say, oh, I need a girl in the story. Have girls embedded into the story as well. All the characters and objects should have a reason for being there, right? We don't want to waste time with unnecessary information. We need to have characters who are going to be central. Only spend time on the characters are really, really needed for the story. Again, the reason for this is we only have a limited amount of space. And for second language learners, they don't have the ability often to retain a lot of facts because they're struggling with the words. They can't remember many facts. So don't put too many facts and stories and characters in there. There's one story by Oxford, which has, on the first 2 pages, has 17 characters. That's way too many characters. The next thing is keep the plot within the psychological and linguistic reality of the readers. So make sure that if your story is about a fantasy, that's fine. And basically, as long as your setting is consistent, like in the Harry Potter series, we have magic. Now, in Harry Potter's world, magic is okay. Unusual supernatural things are okay, but that would not happen in an ordinary story of yours and mine. So it's important to ensure that the backgrounds are understood. The next thing is there should be real conflict, and real conflict should be boring. However, as I said, conflicts come from the characters, not the situation. So maybe the situation is about a war, like Jojo's situation. The story in Jojo is not about how do I stop the war, it's how does Jojo survive? How does Jojo react to that? So Jojo's conflict is not so much about whether he's going to fight in the war or not. What's Jojo's conflict is about how does he survive without family? What's he going to do next? So this is the conflict that he faces, and we have to deal with that conflict. It's a personal conflict. The conflict does not have to be physical. It can be mental, a mental challenge like a broken relationship, for example. Similarly, the conflict should be inescapable. So we can't just write a story where the character can suddenly escape. So, for example, if you have a character being chased down the street by a man, there's a woman being chased down the street by a man, and the woman's turning the corner, she runs a bit more, the man's getting closer and closer. That sounds like a conflict, and it is. However, if the woman is in trouble like that, maybe she can just go to the police station. Maybe she can ask people in the street for help. So the conflict can be, you can escape from the conflict in that situation. So we have to make sure that the conflict is inescapable. So we change the setting to, for example, a woman is being chased through a forest and she's getting nearer and nearer the edge of a cliff and she's going to fall over. What does she do? Does she turn around and fight, or does she jump off the cliff into the river? So the conflict should be inescapable. She has to make a choice. So the conflict must be progressive. It must get bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's your duty as an author to make your characters suffer. So that story of the lady running through the forest, she has to make a choice. Does she jump and into the river and maybe die or get hurt, or does she face the attacker? So this is conflict she cannot escape, and she has to make a decision. The next thing is, there has to be a believable payoff. So an inaccessible premise will inevitably fail to satisfy. That is, if you don't have a good premise, if you don't have a good concept, you're not going to have a satisfying story. So asking adults to read a story about a teddy bear that's lost is not going to be interesting to many adults. Every story needs an obligatory scene, which brings about the climax and resolution of the story. And we saw that in the story about the case, when the man was asked what's in the case. So if your hero is out to save the world, we need to know whether he or she actually manages to save it. Yeah? Does the world actually get saved or not? So if that's your premise, you must resolve that premise. All of your plots and subplots need to be resolved this way. So we can't just leave things hanging at the end of the book. We need to resolve that, unless you have book 2 in the series. Notice that emotional resolution is often more difficult to achieve than plot resolution. So if a woman, for example, starts off the story being lonely through a broken relationship, that's an emotional thing she needs to deal with. It's much different to say she starts off with a story being poor, and at the end she has money. That's relatively easy to work out because you just earn money. You go and get a job. So emotional resolution is much more difficult to achieve, and you have to make sure that's achieved in a good way. So if you're thinking about a story that you're going to write for yourself or for students, maybe you even want to publish it, we have to think about how we would write the story well. One of the important things is, which words are you going to choose that can tell a convincing world? Remember, with graded readers, you have a limited vocabulary. Maybe you only have 200, 300, 400 words, and you need to explain the story and tell the story with a limited vocabulary. You can't throw in rare words, you can't throw in unusual words unless you have them illustrated. So can you tell a story with very few words? We saw with Jojo, it was a very, very simple English, but quite a complex story. The next, can you capture a character in a few telling details? So we saw with Jojo, we saw that Jojo's character will emerge from the way that Jojo is going to be making choices. Similarly, can you write dialogue that sounds real? Does it sound like someone would actually say it? Or does it just read in a very stiff way, just so I can practice the past tense or a relative clause? We should not think that way. We should write, what would the student actually say? What would the person say? Next one, can you envisage exactly and honestly how your characters react in the situation you put them? So you have to imagine, if you set up the story about a girl called Susan, you have to ask yourself, what would Susan do now? What would Susan do in this situation? So you need to imagine your character. Given Susan's character of being a kind person, what would Susan do next? The next one is you need a compelling opening. We saw with Jojo that the story was very compelling. Jojo's village has been destroyed by some men. We don't know why. We want to find out why. And so the opening chapter really gets the story going. So don't spend too much time saying Jojo is a boy, he lives in Africa, his village has been killed by some men. We don't need to do that. Build up the setting from what's going on. Oops. Try if you can to avoid throwing too many names into the story in the first few paragraphs to get them out of the way. So bring each character in gently so as not to overload the reader. Now, if you want to write non-fiction material, this is at one side easier, but at the other side it's more difficult. It's easier in the sense that you can research the content and then you can write that. So maybe you want to write a biography about someone, or you want to write an introduction to a particular topic. You want to write about Bali or Indonesia or religion or some topic. That's easy because you can research that, but it's sometimes more difficult to write because it usually has some technical vocabulary which the students need to look at. So the language often differs from fiction as well. There's no dialogue usually in non-fiction material, and we write in a slightly different style. So you need to be familiar with the topic and understand the core concepts well so you can explain them. The other point with non-fiction material is sometimes the artwork can be expensive. So if you want to publish this, remember the publisher has to print the material and they need to find the pictures. And sometimes when they're buying the pictures, they can be very expensive. Also, when writing your story, you've got to make sure that the story keeps going. How do we keep the story going? How do we make sure that the story has movement and it's progressively building up to our climax, building up to our obligatory scene? When you end a chapter, you need to put a hook at the end of the chapter where something dramatic is happening at the end of the chapter. Often a choice has to be made so that now the reader wants to continue reading. They get to the end of the chapter. Oh, let me just do one more chapter tonight before I go to sleep, because they want to find out what happens. So add little hooks at the end of each chapter to keep the reader going. If you can, try to show what's happening, as we saw with Jojo. Jojo was telling us about why there's no days, was telling us about why people are dead. He wasn't in the house. There were fires. There were mice. Really sets up the scene, right? The writer's not saying there was a fire, there were some mice, people are dead. Jojo's explaining this to us as we discover the story. So it's much more satisfying to discover and experience the story with Jojo through dialogue and action rather than to be told about it as in a documentary. So it's very important to do that. Dialogue is the next thing. The dialogue should be lively, particularly for low-level readers, and processing large pieces of text in a new language is difficult. So we have to write so that students can read and the dialogue is believable and so on. Dialogue is good. It breaks up text and helps the reader to engage effectively with the story and to help experience it. Dialogue is quite personal, and therefore the dialogue that people say is a lot easier to engage with because you feel you're experiencing it with someone else. And so dialogue is a very good way to engage the reader into the story. The dialogue also should be natural. Again, please don't write just so that you can put in a particular grammatical form. Write it as someone would naturally say it. Otherwise, the story becomes stiff. The story becomes just an English lesson. And graded readers should not be an English lesson. Graded reading, extensive reading, should be a way to read where students don't even know or don't even think that they're reading in English. They're just enjoying the story. So it should be natural. And if you write material that looks too much like English class, then the students maybe will be less likely to be engaged. So the dialogue also should keep the thing going. It should move the story along. The other things to think about would be the title. The title has to be accessible and exciting. Try if you can to have it so that when the student reads the story title, they don't really know what the story's about. They say, oh, this title looks interesting. For example, you would not want to say Jojo's story would be, for example, Jojo's struggle in a war. We don't want to know that. We want to find out about Jojo's story. So it's open-ended. We don't know. It asks questions. Chapter headings too have to be intriguing and don't give away the plot. You don't want to turn the page and then read the title of the chapter and it tells you what the chapter's about, because that spoils the story for the reader. So leave it as a teaser rather than as an actual statement of what's in the story. Make sure you have, as much as you can, a linear time frame. Linear here means time, so we have it in time order, specifically for low-level learners. Try to keep the story in time order. If you have flashbacks, some stories have a flashback, maybe go back a week, or each chapter has a different character talking. So in chapter 1, we have Diane is the main character. Chapter 2, we have Tony as the main character. That's going to make it very difficult for the students to work out what's going on. Try, if you can, to have the story written from one person's perspective, so that we're with Diane on the journey she's taking through the story. So try, if you can, to keep the story with one person and try not to jump around too much. The next thing too is to build a sense of place. Try to build up a world in your head about where the story is taking place. Being a specific time or a place really helps the reader to situate the story. So maybe the story's in the past, it's in the future, maybe it's a fantasy story. Whatever the story setting is, you need to build the story setting so that the students will be able to relate to it and can easily imagine the story. Try, if you can, not to expect too much background knowledge. So if you want to write a story about Victorian England, if your students don't know about Victorian England, it's going to be very, very hard for them to understand. So also we have to look at some of the things which we should avoid doing when we're writing stories. Try not to explain too much. Try not to explain Joe did this, Bob did that. Best not to explain. It's best to let the story unfold by the decisions and choices of the people. Try, if you can, to avoid deus ex machina. These are what we call acts of gods. These are sudden resolutions to move the plot forward. So what do I mean by this? So, for example, these are unbelievable events that are in the setting of our story. Let's go back to our story about the girl being chased through the forest. So she's being chased through the forest by this man. We want to know what's going to happen to her. And we have to put her in a situation, she has to make a choice. As I said, she either jumps off the edge of the cliff into the river and escapes that way, or she turns and fights the man. It's not a good idea to suddenly have the police turn up, right? If the police suddenly arrive, that's not satisfying because she's saved from her choice. If the police turn up, that's not going to be a good way to solve the story. We have to see the girl solve the story for herself in some way. The police can come later. So it's important for the girl to be put into a position of making a choice. We have to see her make the choice and what happens because of that. We shouldn't have, special events suddenly come and solve the situation for us. And it's very unsatisfying when we see that happen. We have to have consistent setting and time and character. So please don't be inconsistent. So if you have children, for example, acting like adults, as we often see in Hollywood movies, this is not satisfying. We should have children acting as children, making children's choices. We can't have someone who's told to be shy suddenly become outgoing. So be consistent with the setting, be consistent with the time and the character, and then it creates a believable world. Make sure the plot line is clear. There are not too many flashbacks so that the students would get lost. Let's not have some implausible events. These are events which would simply never happen. objects that don't exist or characters that can't exist. Unless it's a fantasy story and you've created those objects, please avoid using implausible events, right? I mean, you're not, for example, going to have a young child escape by suddenly jumping in a car and driving away because they don't know how to drive a car, right? Let's not have unexplained events. The events in the story should be explainable. If there's going to be a villain, this is going to be a bad person in the story, typically we would have a comeuppance. In the end, if somebody's acting badly, at the end of the story, there has to be a price for being bad. Most stories are resolved this way. We cannot have someone who's evil remaining evil at the end of the story, because that's just not the way most stories go. We have to have someone who's doing something bad, has to have a comeuppance, have to have some kind of punishment or a change in character at the end. Don't expect too much from background knowledge. As I said, if the students don't know about Victorian England, or they're not familiar with America in the 15th century, then it's just going to be very, very difficult to understand. So that you have to make sure the students are familiar with the background. And also, particularly if you're going to publish with an international publisher, there are some events which we should not talk about. Violence, drugs we should avoid, also alcohol, sexual stereotyping, even in some countries sex itself should be avoided, because this would make the book unpublishable in some settings. I showed you before a picture of one of my series that I did. I wrote a series, the first series was Foundations Reading Library. And in that, one of the stories there was about a boy meets a girl. And they start to date. Now, when these books were sent to Saudi Arabia, and they were trying to decide whether to buy the series or not, in Saudi Arabia, these stories were not allowed to be sold. They are banned in Saudi Arabia. Why? Because in Saudi Arabia, there is no concept, or typically is no concept of boyfriend and girlfriend. They don't have boyfriends and girlfriends. Typically, that's the sort of standard government line. But of course, in real life, that might be different. But because the idea is that, you know, boys and girls should be their relationships should be decided by their parents, close relatives. Therefore, the concept of boyfriend and girlfriend doesn't exist. Therefore, the books could not be published, and that was a real problem for me. Also, some years ago, I was working on a series of books, and this picture came up. But according to the rules of publishing, this picture was unacceptable. Was unacceptable. Can you think why? Why was this unacceptable? Now, the setting for this was about 20 years ago. And this was in the time when Bill Clinton was president, and there was a policy in the US called No Child Left Behind. And if you wanted to get a book, to buy a book with money from the government in the No Child Left Behind policy, you had to meet a certain number of rules. And this picture did not meet one of those rules. Can you think why? They're not wearing a life jacket.
Okay.
Which is crazy. You and I know this is crazy, right? The story is like 200, 300 years ago. They didn't have life jackets. But according to the rules, we have to make sure that the characters in the story are wearing safety helmets, that they are doing things properly and safely, that they're not drinking alcohol, they're drinking orange juice, and so on and so on. So, of course, we laughed about this, so we had to change the picture, and we put the boat on the side of the river with a life jacket a little bit coming from the top of the boat. So sometimes you have to have very, very silly things like this to consider.
Pak Rob, you have a few minutes left.
Okay, so now we're going to look at this. How can I come up with a storyline? So if you're going to write a story, these are some of the things that you need to think about. What's the decision? Okay, what's the decision and the dilemma? What's the premise of your story? So, for example, this is a story about a father who's worried about how to bring up her child. That's your setting. The setting is home and it's a family scene. Who are the characters? Father and a young daughter. So what's the main storyline here? Well, the storyline is a father's very worried about her daughter's sense of values. So there's a conflict in the father. The father sees the daughter screaming for ice cream. The daughter goes to the shop. Daddy, I want an ice cream. No, you can't have an ice cream. Scream, 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 scream. I want an ice cream. I want an ice cream. I want an ice cream. So daughter has very bad behavior. Similarly, daughter gets a book for a birthday present. I don't want the book. No, thank you. I don't want the book. Books are no good. The daughter screams when daddy takes away the video game. So this is the setting. The father is very worried about the daughter's sense of values. So the daughter now feels that the father feels the daughter wants to test his daughter. So the daughter is given an iPad, a book, and money, cake, and they're put onto a table. And the father says, "Hey, darling, which of these is most important to you? Please choose one of them." So the daughter's asked to choose, and this is our obligatory scene. We're now going to find out about how the daughter feels about this. And what does the daughter do? The daughter runs to father and hugs him and says, "I choose daddy." Okay? So this is an unexpected ending and shows that maybe dad doesn't need to worry so much about the daughter. So this is a very simple storyline that could be written. So here's another one. If we a delusion is, how do you stand up for yourself when somebody is bullying you? A come-uppers and pride. So this is the setting is a high school English class. Is a very macho, very strong bully type of boy and a shy girl. These are our main characters. The bully laughs at the shy girl who has bad English pronunciation. Maybe in class, ha 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 ha, your English is no good. The boy's friends laugh and they mock her. They make fun of her. And their bully says she's hopeless. So she's attacked by this bully. The bully plays in the park, but his bike breaks. The bully's friends cannot repair it. His dilemma, he's panicking, he's late for soccer. The shy girl repairs the bike for him, and the bully helps her with an English. So we have some kind of a resolution to the story. Is this a good story? Well, maybe. This is our story. Could the readers relate to the situation? Well, yes. They probably could see this. Would this really happen? No, probably not. It probably wouldn't happen. The next thing is, whose story is this? Is this the bully's story or is this the shy girl's story? It's not clear from this outline whose story it is. Whose story are you telling here? It's not clear. So this is maybe something you need to work on. The next one, where's the emotion in the story? Not really much emotion here. It's just a series of events. We can't really empathize with the characters because the story's not set up that way. And it's difficult to know how we would make the reader care about the story. The next thing is, if you're going to write a story with images, what would the pages look like? So when you're thinking about story writing, this is very important. So in my last minute that I have or so, I want to talk to you about a place where you can get your readers published. So there's a website that's called xreading.com. It's a website which is an international website that has stories that are written by famous publishers, and they also have now independent authors. So if you want to do this, the goal is to give authors and grade readers an outlet for their works. If you want to write your own story, you can submit it to this xreading.com website. Now, the thing is, this is a pay website, so you can even get paid for your story. So they want to accept stories from authors. So please contact me if you want to find out about that. I'm helping X Reading with that. So if you're interested in writing graded readers, please feel free to get in contact with me. There is a Gmail email group which is set up for writers of graded readers, where you can discuss and ask questions and talk about your storylines. So I hope that I've given you something interesting there. And please contact me if you plan to be a graded reader author. I'm now going to write my email address into the chat window for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Pak Rob. Okay, right. Big applause for Pak Rob Waring and also Bu Clara. And now we come to the question and answer sessions. And we have a few questions on the chat box. And I think the questions for Clara, some of them has been answered. Is that correct, Bu Clara?
Yes, Bu. I think I have still one question and answer session.
Okay, right. Yeah, Pak Rob Waring, you have also a few questions, and I will read the questions later. And Bu Clara, would you like to answer Pak Saifur Rahman's questions?
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, right. Yeah. Thank you, Pak Saifur Rahman. This is very good question because it is about the how practically we created the books, and I really want to go to Madura someday. And the question is about how could I collaborate with the local artists in the first place? That is very good question because before we created the books, we make a competition for all the people to write the stories. In Indonesia, we call this as a sayembara penulisan. So we gave an opportunity for all the people who want to express their ideas on the Loh Ayu storybooks, and also after that we select the good story and we try to collaborate with them, as well as with the illustrator and also animator. There are local artists. We do like select their works and match with the specific specification of the books of Loh Ayu that we want to create it. And then the second question is about the funding. Yes, I think this is a something that really matters because without fund we cannot make or produce such a books. For the first, second, and third book, we are funded by the Asia Foundation. And we are so thrilled that the Asia Foundation gave us such a funding to make those kind of 3 books. And the 4th book are funded by the National Geographic Society. And the 5th book is funded by the United in Diversity, and the 6th one from the people in Washington, D.C., United States. And what I can suggest, if Bapak or Ibu here want to make the storybooks and try to get the funding, is try to make a good proposal and try to, submit your proposals in a National Geographic opportunity grant. It's really good grant for you. I really encourage you to try once, and then try to go to some website or foundation that can give you funding. And so far, the books that we created, all of that funding, all are funded by the organization or foundation outside Indonesia, and that is we are so thrilled with that. And yeah, I encourage you to try once. And that is the question, Ibu Ani, that I can answer from Pak Saifur Rahman. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Bu Clara. We have Ibu Martini raises hand. Ibu Martini, are you with us?
Yes.
Okay. So I give you a chance to ask questions. To whom is it, Ibu Martini? To Ibu Clara or Pak Rob?
To Mr. Rob. Is it okay?
Yes. Okay. Yes, please do.
Should I turn on my camera?
Yes, if your connection is fine, that would be great, Ibu Martini. If not, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Rob. Thank you very much for the very nice presentation. It's about how to write a graded book. But actually, I'm not asking about that, about how to write, because I think it's too difficult for me. My question is about my implementation of extensive reading activity in my class. I'm a teacher in a senior high school, so my students are around the age are around 14 to 17 years old. And then so far, I have implemented the extensive reading activity since last year. In the beginning of the lesson, I always ask my students to do the reading, extensive reading, and then because this is in the pandemic, so we do via online learning. My problem is I do not know that my materials that I send to my students are really appropriate to my students. If I give them stories about Indonesian stories written in English, I think they have known the story, even though they do not understand the English. So I seldom give the stories about Indonesian stories. I give the stories from Western. But you have said in the beginning, it's difficult for the student to understand about the story, about of the cross-culture understanding. So would you please to give me or to give us an idea what kind of stories or sources that it's suitable for my student? So far, I give them stories, classic stories from Hans Christian Andersen or Aesop fables, or maybe from Shakespeare, but simplified by other authors. So the story is not original story from the Shakespeare, but from the other author. It's simplified by them. So is it okay? So in the end of the lesson, the students should report what they have read. Why I ask them to do that, to check whether they read or not. So my question is about what title of the story that they have read and what is story about. And then I also ask them to write some difficult words to check whether the stories are too difficult for them or not. So is it okay if I do that? So I need your what is it, opinion or suggestion, what should I do so far? And I also use extensive reading centrals for my students to choose the story that they like. You know that in this platform there are reading and listening, but most of the students never choose listening, they only choose reading.
Right.
Okay, I think that's my question. Thank you very much, and I hope that I get the explanation from you. Again, thank you very much for the nice presentation.
Okay, thank you. That's probably about 20 questions in one there. I'll try to answer that. The ultimate thing is, to be honest, nobody can really tell what your students need except you, because you know your students and their interests better than anybody. The correct answer, there isn't a correct answer. What I would suggest you do, though, is ask your students, what do you want to read about? Ask them what they know about. And I think they're a very valuable source of knowledge that we need to take advantage of. If you just tell them, please read this, it doesn't matter what the topic would be, there's always going to be somebody in your class who will love it, and always somebody in your class is going to hate it. So free choice is very important. About stories with background knowledge, yes, we have to be very, very careful about that. You don't want to have to go and explain background knowledge all the time. So try to have stories which are quite general, if you can. If you're going to do a story with a background which they're not familiar with, you might want to do this as a class reader. So all the students read the same book, and we can do like one chapter a week together over the semester, and you can explain some of the story in the background as we go. So class readers are another way to deal with difficult cultural background. But again, for Indonesian students, is it important that they know about 18th century England? Probably not. If they're history students, yes. So we have to think of the larger picture. What are they interested in? They're probably much more interested in, travel, sports, maybe some dramatic events, other countries, the places, cultural stuff. So finding that material is going to be really important. In the end, I have to say that you're going to have to choose, and allow them to stop reading. If they don't enjoy something, they should stop reading and then go and read something else. That freedom of choice is just so important. But I would spend your time asking your students, and maybe take them to the bookstore and say, we have money to buy one book or 6 books for the class. Let's decide together which books to buy. And I think getting the students to tell you is more important, because otherwise we're just guessing. I would, if I'm choosing books for students, I'm going to buy them based on what I think would be good for them. But I'm not a 14-year-old child, and what they're interested in, I don't know. I was a 14-year-old child 50 years ago. So, life has changed. And so we can't use our own background to guess what they want. I'm sorry that's a very vague answer, but it ultimately comes down to you testing certain things out. Try this and see if it works. If it doesn't, try something else. Yeah. Borrow books from other teachers if you can. If you can share libraries with other schools, you can then have a wider range of material. So maybe in your area, there's 6 schools doing extensive reading. Learn to share some of your library between the schools. Will provide a lot richer material for them.
Okay. Right. Thank you. Rob, Bu Martini, I hope it answer your questions. Rob, there is a question.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. From Bu Kusuma Rasdiati. Dr. Waring, it is probably easier to simplify the language. However, if there are cross-cultural issues in the story, what should we do? Add some cultural notes in the story or omit them?
Well, you can do that. The problem, of course, is if you're going to write a story that's just for your students and you're going to print it from your printer and give it to your students, that's fine. You can do anything you like. But if you're writing for publishing, for online publishing, or for a publisher, they often have a format you need to obey. So most graded readers don't have cultural notes. So at the beginning of the story or part way through the story, some series could be written that way, and maybe that's a good new series to write. Find things that Indonesian students want to know about, that don't know about, write the stories but have cultural notes in them. So the problem with cross-cultural information is if each student is choosing their own book, you don't know what book they're reading until maybe they've finished it, or what kind of cultural things they're struggling with. So I would try to avoid buying material which is too unfamiliar for them unless you're dealing with it in a systematic way. You have to be a bit careful. So cross-cultural issues, one thing you could do is ask the student to write down problems with cultural issues they're having and ask you. But again, the problem with that is if you don't know yourself, you're going to have to look it up. And if you have 20 students all reading different books and all of them have got cultural questions for you, you're going to have a lot of individual questions to answer. So the best thing to do is to maybe make them all read the same material where it's really different, or try to deal with it individually, or set it as a research project for them. That would be my answer there. Again, as a teacher, you'll have to decide what's best. I see a question here about self-publishing for elementary students.
Yes.
And about sharing engaging stories. And one thing that I saw was, how can we access certain words? And I talked about vocabulary. Now, I do have a few more slides that I could talk to you about. One of the important things about graded reader writing is that we have levels. So we have level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4. So for example, level 1 may be written with a fixed vocabulary of 200 different words. You can only use those 200 words because those are the words the students know. Level 2, maybe you have 300 different words, so the original 200 plus 100 more. Level 3 would have, say, 500 words, the 300 from level 1 and 2 plus another 200. So the vocabulary is getting recycled. Now, how do you know what these words are for your story? And I'm going to share with you, if you don't mind, a website that's called ER Central. And one of the tools it has is what's called the Online Graded Text Editor. And what I've done here for you is I've already put some text into the story, into this. So the online graded text edit, it's a completely free tool. What it does here is if you take your text, this is your text, let's say you're writing a story, and you want to say, well, my students are about mid-elementary level, and I want to find out which words may be too difficult for them, right? So you've written a story, so you press the go button, and what this will do, this will analyze the text and will highlight for you words which are probably too difficult. So these ones which are underlined in red come from a different level. You can see I've chosen level 6 here. So 7%, beg your pardon, level 7 is 13.9%, and so on and so on. These are the amount out. There's a lot of vocabulary outside the level. So we have 85% of the vocabularies up to level 6, 14% is outside. That's going to be very difficult for them to read. So what that means, either you need to change the level of the book, or you need to edit the material. So this already has preset vocabulary there for you. If you want to use this tool, it's completely free. You can use this, and this is a way that will help you to find out the level of your material and to edit it. So you can keep editing until this figure comes up to closer to 95%. So that might be a tool that will help you when you're writing. Now, this doesn't have to be used just for writing stories. This could also be using for teaching material. So if you're writing material worksheets for your students and you're not sure if the students will know it or not, put it into this. This will maybe give you a hint to say, oh, this word here, apologetic, maybe I need to take it out. Or this word here, oops, dump, it looks like it probably will be too difficult. So this is a good hint for you as a writer of even teaching materials, not just graded reading materials. So this is a free website that you can use.
Okay, right. Thank you, Paro. Paro, is that also for, are we talking about CEFR level for the level of the words?
This could also, there's different word lists you can choose. If you want to choose the CEFR levels, you can choose that, and you can analyze, for example, by A1 level and so on. You can do it by different tools.
Okay, right.
So there's different types of ways that you can analyze by. If you're writing business material or TOEIC material, Cambridge, CAT, general service list, you can choose that for different.
Okay, great. Great website. Thank you. And we have a question that's from Puput, I think, about the self-publication. And yeah, the question has been answered, Puput. And now we have Fatim Masliha. And she is asking about, yeah, motivating students to visit and read. It's quite challenging, and the books are not allowed to be brought home because, you know, I might lose it and things like that. What do you think about the policy? Yes, please, Paro. Yeah.
I think that maybe the school can deal with that in another way. I think one way to do that is to make sure that the books get recorded somehow. They write them down on a piece of paper, or there's like a library card inside. And maybe the students don't bring them back, but you know who's got that book. And we should only allow them to have maybe one book at a time. I think another reason that maybe schools don't want to do that is because if every child takes a book home, there's 500 students in the school, but only 800 books in the library, your library is going to be very small. So not so much choice, yes? So I allow my students to take the books home. Most of them will return them. As long as you have a good book, when we do that, is everybody borrows the book on, say, a Wednesday, and they all bring them back on the Wednesday. If you have them bringing them back at different times, it makes management much more difficult. So I would suggest that you have a set borrowing time, and that you have, or if that's the situation, class time. That's another way to get more reading done, but they don't have to take the books home.
Okay, right.
In some universities, they will find the students. In some universities, they find the students, but that's kind of a bit too much, I think. Yeah?
Right. But we still have two more questions. It's about Is it possible to bring specific settings such as health settings every time we write a story? And should I direct them away from the specific setting to give them real vocabulary inputs from reading extensively from other contexts? That's from Ika Sulis, because she is teaching in a health polytechnic. And the other question is about considering the importance of graded readers. What can we do to give it ample space in TEFL curriculum? From Ibu Tiwi. Thank you.
Okay, so you're teaching health polytechnic. Yes, I think if you want to do stories on health settings, that's a great thing to do. So you basically have two choices. One of which is, do you want to write a dramatic story, or do you want to write non-fiction material? So one thing that your students will probably need is the technical vocabulary of health, or let's say business or technology or whatever the topic would be. My advice would be probably to find material which is non-fiction material, because that will give them the vocabulary that they need. If you have a dramatic story about health, probably the language will not contain too many health words and will not build their vocabulary because it's general English. So I would probably find non-fiction material. What you can do is, as I said before, go and find some text on the internet that you think your students would need, written about health, maybe, some topic, I don't know the topics exactly. Find a web page, put it into the online graded text editor that I showed you before, paste it in there, find the level, look at all the vocabulary which might be too difficult for them, and then you can then use that to edit out words they don't know, or then think, okay, I need to teach this word, I need to teach that word. So that's one way that you can get quite a lot of material quite easily, I think. So, and the second question, sorry?
The second question about the place for in TEFL. So let me read again. The place for what can we do to give it an ample space in TEFL curriculums? The importance of graded readers, right?
Okay, fine. Well, one of the things that we need to do is we need to remember that every curriculum needs balance. We need to make sure that we have time spent studying language, and there's a question here about intensive reading and extensive reading. Clearly, you cannot read extensively until you have a certain amount of vocabulary and a certain amount of grammar. So some form of intensive language study has to come before extensive reading. However, we want to bring in extensive reading as soon as we can. That's why we have books published with very, very, very small vocabulary loads, like 100 different words or 200 words. So even students who've been studying English for a year should be able to start reading extensively, even if they're reading slowly and within a dictionary, that's fine. So we have to make sure there's balance, and you should have about 25% of your time should be on teaching new stuff. 25% of that time should be on building fluency. 25% of the time should be on output, some sort of output as well. And the next one is to have meaning-focused input and building speed. So you need to have that balance. For beginning level learners, it's important to do a little bit more language focus, because they need to build up their vocabulary quickly. And my suggestion would be, if you have to choose between building up grammar or building up vocabulary, build up vocabulary fast, as soon as you can. The main task you've got is to build vocabulary, because without vocabulary, you can understand nothing. With grammar, at least you can understand something. You can understand the words. Even if you don't understand the grammar, you can still get some of the words. So grammar is important, but I think vocabulary is much more important. And also, trying to understand the grammatical point really only makes sense after you've met it hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. You don't get a feeling for, say, past tense until you've met it a lot. If students don't meet the language enough, they're not going to get a sense of how the past tense is, say, different from the present perfect tense. So volume of text is really important. 25% of your time at least should be spent on that, either in class or out. What I would suggest you do is you assign some reading out of class, 25%. And I would say, give them, say, an hour. They should be doing about an hour a week at their ability level. About an hour a week at their ability level is what they should be doing in order to meet enough words regularly before they start to forget them. If you teach the words only once, then of course the students are going to forget. So we have to fight forgetting. And the way to do that is about reading about 1 hour of text a week. Will allow them to meet enough words before they start to disappear in memory. I would move the reading offline if you can, get them to read out of work, outside class, but also come back to class and use the reading for fluency. Talk about your book, write about your book, present about your book, bring it and integrate it in. Don't keep it separate from the class, bring it in as an integral part of the class.
Thank you, Pak Rob. We are running out of time. Thank you very much, Pak Rob, and also Bu Clara. I would like to make a short wrap up about our writing and publishing our graded readers. We learned from Ibu Clara that we can integrate the story or local story to empower people, especially in this part we are talking about gender equality and empower women and girls. And then the power of actually collaborate with local artists, okay, and also people from around us, and also the educational institution around us. And from Rob Waring, we are learning tips and also importance notes on how to write graded readers and how we can use online graded text editors, for example, to help us to create graded readers in a way that it will help our students to love reading. Thank you very much. I'll over to Ibu Mariska. Ibu Mariska.
Thank you very much, Ibu Ani. It was such a fruitful and insightful presentation and discussion, Bapak Ibu. However, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our program today. But before we close the program, there are some announcements that I would like to share. Let me share my screen. It was such a fruitful and insightful presentation and discussion, Bapak Ibu. However, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our program today. But before we close the program, the first one is that I would like to share. Let me share my screen. Wait, sorry. Okay. Me. All right. There will be Virtual Talk 18 on February 27, 2021. It will be hosted by Binus and UNESA in collaboration with IERA, of course. That's my first announcement. And then the second one, I would like to remind you again that extensive reading around the world will be conducted on August 13 to 15, 2021. And more information can be found in erfoundation.org/AW. And the proposal submission will still open up to February. Sorry.
End of February.
At the end of February, yes. February 27. No, sorry.
February 28th. Yeah.
28, yes. Sorry, I lost my, what is it? Note. On February 28th, Rob? Yes? Yep. Okay. Thank you. That's the second announcement for extensive reading around the world. And then for the exit ticket, please go to this link to fill out some form so that we can prepare the certificate, the e-certificate for you, for all the participants. And this form will be available up to 2 p.m. today. Yeah, so we don't have you don't have much time to fill out the form, please do it before 2 p.m. And then the e-certificate and materials will be sent to this folder, and it will be available no later than Thursday, January 21st. We will share the e-certificate and also the materials in this folder. Okay. All right.
Can I just make two short announcements, if you don't mind?
Sure.
The first is, if anybody wants the PowerPoint, I have put the link into the chat window. Please open it now. When this Zoom closes, you're going to lose the link. So please email me if you can't get it now. The second one is that there is an organization called PANSIG, which is part of the Japan Association of Language Teachers. In May, they're going to be holding a special forum on how to write graded reading material for languages other than English. So, for example, Bahasa Indonesia or for Chinese. And if anybody here is interested in writing materials for the learning of Bahasa Indonesia by foreigners, not by native children, then please get in contact. We'd love to hear from you, and for you to maybe even present at the conference in Pansig, which is in May. So this is for the writing of materials to learn Bahasa Indonesian for people like me, not for native children. Okay. If you're interested in Bahasa Indonesia as a second language, writing those materials, please get in contact.
All right. Thank you, Pak Rob, for the additional announcement. I think Ms. Uka has also put the link to the e-certificate, the e-ticket, exit ticket, and also the e-certificate link on the chat box. All right. Next, let us have a photo session. Bapak Ibu, please turn on your video. We have. Let's wait until we have. How many pages do we have? E-certificate link on the chat box. All right. Next, let us have a photo session. Bapak Ibu, please turn on. We have 3 pages. We have. Oh, probably you can help me. Lucky. Okay. All right. Wait. Let me. Okay, I think everybody is ready with the video. And there will be 3 times because we have 3 pages here. So pause for 3 times. Okay, let's have the first one. 1, 2, 3. I think everybody is ready with the video. And there will be 3. Okay, that's the first one because we have 3 pages here. So pause for 3 times. Okay, let's have the first one. And then the second one. 3. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. And then the second one. 3. Okay. 2, 1, 2, and then the third one. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Thank you. We have 3. Okay, finally, we've come to the end of the program. Again, I would like to thank everyone who has participated in this program, the speakers, the moderator, the committee, the panelists, and all the participants. See you on the next virtual talk hosted by Venus and UNESA, and see you on the next virtual program of the American Corner of UMY. If you are interested in joining our programs, you can get the information on our social media account. We have American Corner UMY Facebook fan page. page at amcorner.umj and our Instagram at amcorumj.